Explore opportunity.
Hi everyone, welcome to the latest Goldinvest interview. Today we're talking to Gary Thompson, CEO of exciting silver company Silver47 Exploration, who will introduce us to his company. Welcome, Gary.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate it.
So Gary, as this is our viewers' first introduction to Silver47, please give us your 60 seconds investment pitch. Tell us what the company is all about.
Sure, yeah. Silver47, as the name implies, 47, why 47? We get that question a lot. 47 is the atomic number for silver. It's a silver-focused exploration and development company, and we are looking to build a substantial portfolio of silver-focused assets, mainly in the Americas, more specifically the USA. We have a substantial resource that when we acquired the project, we published a recent 43-101 that gives us about 169 million silver equivalent ounces in South Central Alaska. Yeah, we're pretty excited to advance on that project, and it's really a high growth story. So the plan is to grow the resource and move this to a development scenario, but also looking at perhaps consolidating and some mergers and acquisitions that will allow us to grow. The ultimate goal for this company is to grow it to 1 billion ounces of silver equivalent. So that's the ambition that we have set out for Silver47.
Well, thank you very much. That's certainly, an ambitious goal there, I think. You'll have to do some drilling. So let's get into that. Let's talk about your flagship project, which is the Red Mountain project, I think, in Alaska. Please give us a bit more context. Tell us about location, size, available infrastructure, etc.
Red Mountain is it's a district scale project. It's a very large land package. We have 60 kilometers of strike of prospective geology for VMS, volcanogenic massive sulfide type deposits, and also SEDEX, which is kind of like an end member of the VMS classification. But these are polymetallic type deposits, so there's a lot of base metals in the system, but there's also these VMSs can also be quite rich in precious metals. And the reason that we're interested in it is for the silver and gold component of it. Right now, like I said, the resource sits at inferred resource sits at 15.6 million tons at rate of about 3.36 grams per ton silver equivalent, or on a zinc equivalent basis, it's about 1 million tons of zinc at 7% equivalent. But there's gold, silver, copper, lead, zinc are the main commodities. And we can talk a bit more about one of our recent news releases where we announced significant, pretty consistent amounts of antimony and gallium, which are two very critical and strategic metals, which are dominated by China and Russia, and those have been taken off the market. So it puts a lot of onus on advancing more of those minerals. So we can talk more about that. So yeah, it's located. It's about 100 kilometers due south of Fairbanks, Alaska. Just to the west, actually to the west and to the east, there's a road that loops around, but I think the closest infrastructure option for us is about 30 to 80 kilometers to the west. And I say that because the property is about 60 kilometers long and it has an east-west trend. So there's a rail line, road, and power source out to the west there. That's ultimately where we're going to tie into. Right now, we're utilizing some winter trails. There is some trail access into the project. So we're utilizing these winter roads to get supplies in there so we can operate over the season. The plan is to get in there soon and towards the end of May and start drilling. The focus for us this year is going to be largely to grow the resource that we have. We have two zones that are part of the resource that make up the resource. They're about 2.7 kilometers apart, and the plan is to do some infilling and expansion drilling on that, and to hope to come up with a revised resource in early 2026.
Okay, so there we already have a lot of detail and a lot of stuff to talk about. You already gave us a bit of information on the resource also, and you said you're hoping to start drilling in May. But subsequent or before of course, end of last year already, I think it was, you published some drill results that were in addition to the resource, if I understand that correctly. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
We did some drilling, really a handful of holes in last summer in 2024. It was largely really a confirmation drilling exercise to test some of the silver gold hits that we had, some pretty impressive hits on both the Dry Creek and the West Tundra zones that make up part of the resource. So what we did is we looked at some of the gold hits in Dry Creek. So there's a couple holes that were about 100 meters apart. We decided to split the difference and drill in between it, so a bit of an infill hole. But what was encouraging with that Dry Creek hole is that we were, anticipating, based on those other two holes that were there, previous drilling, that were in that sort of 5 to 8 gram gold with substantial silver, 400 or 500 gram silver hits. And what we encountered was some of the best gold intercepts to date in that hole 106. We cut almost 15 grams of gold, including 250 grams silver, 22% zinc, 7% lead, and about 0.4% copper. So that equates to, on a silver equivalent basis, it equates to over 2,900 grams per ton silver equivalent over 2.5 meters. What's interesting about this zone is you get these horizons of massive sulfide, which are basically metal. There's no rock, all been replaced with metal. So these multiple horizons we get multiple horizons. We had another 0.9 meter interval of about 2,200 grams silver equivalent. Again, high gold, silver, really high zinc and lead and copper, plus antimony and gallium in there as well. So those 2.5, a 0.9, there's also a 5 meter interval there. That was all within 24.5 meter interval of mineralization. So you get these really dense, massive sulfide horizons within a broader, sort of interlayered within semi-massive sulfide horizons. So that was really encouraging, because that shows us that our grades, gold grades, are actually can be quite high here, and certainly higher than the previous drilling. And what's interesting about that, there's just not much drilling below that. So that's what we want to test this year is, okay, we got this nice gold hit, and then can we, just step down that and down the zone. And there's lots of room to expand on that zone. So that's going to be one of our areas of focus this year, is to flush out some more of the precious metal enrichment. So what we think is that's going to do is, ultimately, we believe, if I'm assuming that we're going to have more like that's going to improve the grade and the quality of the resource. So that was on the Dry Creek. And then if you step over 2.5 kilometers to the West Tundra Flats zone, this is an interesting one, because it's actually, well, if you look at the Dry Creek zone, it has a bit of a steep dip to the north, whereas the West Tundra Flats is actually more of a shallow dipping uniform layer. We drilled a couple holes into there. And what's interesting about that is that the drill spacing on that zone actually are quite large, in some cases 400 or 500 meters apart. So we thought, well, let's go twin some of these holes just to confirm some of the historical drilling. And what was really encouraging about the drilling that we did was some of the 1980s drilling. Just as an example, that hole 8208 drilled 7.3 meters of 619 grams silver equivalent. And one of our holes that we drilled was actually we had a broader interval, 22 meter interval of mineralization. And within that, there was about 3 meters of a kilo of silver equivalent. So 417 gram actual silver, just below a gram of gold. So I think the takeaway from that is, and there was another hole, that hole 34 was also about 4.4 meters of 656 grams silver equivalent. So what we're seeing in the drilling that we did last year is that we're getting much better core recovery in the drilling, which is a more accurate representation of the mineralized horizons. And we look back at a lot of the 1980s vintage drilling here didn't capture the core very well. So they had poor core recovery, which means you just didn't get the zone, the mineralized horizon, all that material in the box. So we think that, again, modern day drilling, getting better recovery, point to a higher quality and potentially larger resource, obviously by just infilling that. But yeah, we see lots of room to grow this resource both in grade and in size.
Well, it certainly sounds like it. And I think what you already have a big exploration target on the Red Mountain. I saw that on your website, which is more, I think, I associate with the Australian companies, to be honest, giving out exploration targets. I think that's conceptual in nature. But can you just quickly give us the numbers, what the target is there?
Yeah, so we came up with an exploration target on this project. It is conceptual in nature, and that's the idea of it, is to give some guidance on, what we're shooting for here. And the goal is something like a 50 to 75 million tons. And if you look at the grade, the existing grade that we have, which is about 336, so we're using a 300 to 400 gram silver equivalent grade. And like I mentioned earlier, the recent drilling that we did shows promise for higher grade material. And we hope that grade will push closer to that 400 gram range. But so we give a range, 50 to 75 million tons, 300 to 400 gram silver equivalent, which we think, by the way, are good economic grades for a deposit like this. If you run the numbers on that, on what does that mean, then we're talking 500 to 900 grams silver equivalent. Pretty massive upside potential. I think our base case that we're using is that 50 million tons, 500 million ounces silver equivalent. And what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, if you look at right now, we've got 15.6 million tons. We think it's a good probability of doubling that resource just based on what we know about the mineralized horizons. There's lots of room to expand these things. And what we know about VMS deposits are that they tend to form in clusters, or I like to use the term the string of pearls. How they form along a chain, along the volcanic spreading center on the ocean floor. So usually where there's one, there's more, and we're seeing that in the surface anomalies. There's been a lot of work done on this project. It's not an early stage project. There's a lot of geochemistry, a lot of geophysics, a lot of work that's been done, identified many other targets. So we're pretty confident that, we can add multiple new zones, and that's where that bigger conceptual target comes into play. If we can add another 1, 2, or 3 zones like the West Tundra Flats or Dry Creek, then, we can get to those targets. And if you do the numbers on 2,500 ton a day operation, that's like 18 million tons of material. So we're not far away from an initial 2,500 ton a day potential operation. And then if you go to 5,000 ton, of course, you double that. So 30 million tons. If we get to that 30 million ton target, then I think we're probably moving this thing into a PEA stage and advance into a development story. And ultimately, I think you want to get to that 10,000 ton a day is a pretty healthy operation. That would be the goal, is start out at 2,500 ton a day, move to 5,000 and potentially 10,000 ton a day if you can assemble a couple more zones and make that work. So, from sitting here at 2025, I could see the next couple of years with some good successful drilling campaigns, getting this thing into by 27, getting into a PEA. And then fast track it to a development story. And given the fact that we're on a state managed land, so we don't have any federal jurisdiction.
Yeah, so there's no federal jurisdiction on that land, just the state of Alaska.
Correct. Yeah, that's really an important point, is that we just have to deal with the state, and we have very strong support from the state to advance this project. And the permitting, we're fully permitted for what we want to do. Now they are moving to these 10-year permit scenarios. So we're working on the next iteration of our permit will include a much more robust plan. I think in any event, we've got strong support in the U.S. to advance this project.
Certainly sounds like it. Very interesting. But let's talk about that a bit more, about the critical mineral side or strategic mineral side. You alluded to that already. There was a press release out a couple of weeks ago where you said you had another look at the drill core and saw that there's substantial or significant amounts of gallium and antimony, I think it was, in there.
Yeah, that's correct. With all this critical mineral discussions, we thought, well, let's have a look at our database and the drilling and the geochemistry. What is that telling us about the mineralized system, and what other minerals do we have that are not counted in our resource? And what we identified was antimony, again, which has seen a substantial price appreciation more importantly over the last year, but over the last couple of years, I think as high as $25,000 US a ton. And we found that pretty consistent antimony, and we published up to 6,000 grams per ton. So pretty meaningful amounts. And also gallium, which is another critical mineral. And if you look at those metals, I mean, very strategic, from the US. I think it's about 75% of the world's antimony comes from China and Russia. I think China dominates. I want to say it's like in the 90+% for gallium really comes out of China. Gallium's a bit more inconsistent, we'll say, in the deposit that we've been able to recognize, but antimony is quite consistent in both of the resources. It wasn't included in the resource. In fact, most people aren't getting credit for those critical minerals, and there's a couple of others like vanadium and a few more that we're going to look at. But what we need to do to really understand the true value of these critical minerals is do some metallurgical work on them to see what kind of recoveries we could anticipate in a mining scenario. And so I think it's not zero. I think there's going to be whatever the recovery number is. I think it's going to be some extra credit that we'll get to the resource. And can we put it into the next resource iteration? I'm not sure yet. Let's get through that metallurgical work and see what the numbers come back with. But it's encouraging that we have them pretty consistently in this deposit. There's also, if you look on the western end of the project, there's a couple of targets. And one of them has pretty substantial amounts of tin. And it's not unusual to see tin in these deposits either. That's sort of on the west end, more SEDEX style mineral type showing. So we're planning to do a bit more work on those as well.
Okay, very interesting. I mean, not only you and your shareholders also are anxious for you probably to get drilling sooner than later, because you're in a very good spot here with the silver price. I think between 33, 34 at the moment. Voices, a couple of people, experts saying it has room to run till 40. Gold, of course, which you said you have some good credits there, is above 3,000 at the moment. Antimony, gallium have skyrocketed since China said that they're or banned exports. At least I think it was on antimony. I'm not sure if it's a complete ban on gallium. But anyway, that's a good place to be in at the moment. So we're certainly looking forward to the drill start turning soon. I think you just you closed the financing, so you're ready to go on that front, right? You have the funds available to do that work.
What we did, we're not officially closed on the final tranche. I think we're actually have a fourth closing coming up. April 2nd is a target close. So, interestingly, we originally launched a $3 million offering. And the first week, I think our timing was good. Window was open, and we announced a very attractive 50-cent unit financing. And the first week we were basically double what we had thought we were going to bring in. So we announced an substantial upsize to 8 million, and then now subsequently we had it again and tremendous amount of demand, and we further upsized it to 11 million.
Okay.
So we're in that final fourth close on the 11 million. So we'll see how that shakes out. I'm not sure that we'll get to the full 11, but I think if we can get over 10 total, I think I'm pretty happy with that, given that we started at 3.
Yeah, I would think so, and it would allow you to do a meaningful amount of work. Thank you very much for taking the time. I think it's clear this is an interesting story, certainly in the markets that we have. And if the metals prices move even higher, it can only get better, and the worth of your value of your existing resource will only grow. So thank you very much for taking the time again, and we'll be sure to check in when there's further news. Thank you very much.
Very welcome. Thank you.